We're talking NFC West today. How did the teams fare in 2019? What can we expect in 2020? Yes, we are back after a hiatus, a pandemic-related hiatus. Not that Brad or I got sick, but just because life's getting a little bit weird for yours truly. But I am proud to announce that we have the 2020 Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide available now on Amazon. Click the link below and you will be able to buy that book directly on Amazon. Why should you buy the book now? Well, first of all, you get free updates. Secondly, this book is part math, part scouting. We scout for fantasy football. It is deeper than any other guide you're going to get out there. You get those free updates, like I was saying, and there is not a guide on the market that has as long of a history as being right about what players are going to suck and are overrated, like Le'Veon Bell last year, like David Johnson last year, and no book is better at predicting sleepers. Like, hey, Lamar Jackson last year, we told our people to draft him in the 6th, 7th, 8th round last year. Our readers who did that won their leagues going away thanks to Mr. Lamar Jackson. So there you go. There's the little plug. You are listening as usual to Sean and Brad. Brad, how's it going, my friend?
You know, it's good to see you, buddy. It's been a little bit, and I missed you. And I think that it's a nice way to come back to this podcast talking about NFC West.
Oh my goodness!
Because what a wild division filled with talent.
Filled with talent, and I'll say that's a feather in our cap. Last year, as we kind of alluded to when we were teasing this episode out, I know it's been a couple weeks since we launched one, but you know, the NFC West last year, Brad, you and me were high on it. We both thought that they could get 3 playoff teams last year. Now, in the preseason predictions, I'm going to give you credit. You predicted San Francisco would be in the playoffs. I predicted that the Rams were going to get that. We both said Seattle would be in. I had Rams and San Francisco just narrowly missing. You had Seattle in, or San Francisco in, I should say, the whole time. But I will say early in the season, as in the second week of the season, I watched them play and I said, dude, this team is, if they're not the best, they're the second best team in the conference. So I changed my tune early in the season, but we both had them at 10 wins last year at least. We were both on the over. And
right.
And you know what? Top to bottom, like, we'll talk about all the teams, but even Arizona was a fun team to watch last year with Kyler Murray, Cliff Clavin.
Even Arizona was.
It's a fun
they show
division,
promise,
bro.
don't they? Yeah, and we thought they'd be a dumpster fire, and they definitely showed a lot of promise.
Yeah.
And I think it shows where the NFL is going, that, you know, the short athletic quarterback, he could hang, right? He could win.
Absolutely. And you know, I lose my notes, of course, right as we get started here. But I have the season kind of stats up there. And we'll go too heavy into the stats here, but yeah, during the NFL season. So my big question, we'll start with Arizona, I guess, just kind of get them out of the way, because you know, this is basically a slug match between the other 3 teams all season long. The interesting thing about Arizona is I wasn't sure what was going to happen, whether, you know, Kingsbury, how was his system going to do? You know, I'm not a big fan of teams that go completely heavy towards one thing, and we know Kingsbury was a passer. Like, I was worried, is he going to be like Dirk Cutter in Atlanta, who I've been very critical of, the guy who like throws the ball 70% of the time and just ignores the run? I'm just not big on that, because I think if you take away the threat of either running or passing, then teams can, it just makes it easier for the defense to game plan against you. But I got to say, man, and Murray, I was wondering if because look, he's a shorter guy. Yes, he is athletic. He has a cannon for an arm. Super fast, super quick. I was worried, is a system going to be one of those things where every play they're going to have to roll Kingsbury out, or roll Kyler Murray out so that he could throw the ball over the offensive line. But that's the way it was through preseason, maybe the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. But after a while, man, Murray was carving people up in the secondary there from the pocket. I like this team going into 2020. I liked watching this team in 2019. What I don't like, Brad, is their competition.
I think that moving forward.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, their competition is what I was going to mention. I mean, I think moving forward, they're going to be able to compete. But, you know, as good as Kyler Murray can take them and become, I don't know if they have yet what it takes to move into that number 1 slot in the division.
No
and
way.
I think, right, I mean, because you got Seattle, you got San Francisco, obviously. And, you know, the Rams, I don't know what they're going to be. And it's tough to say. They took a step back, right? And they've kind of lost their luster. And I don't know if you have a theory about what's going on there.
So let me close to that, because that's a great segue into the Rams. So let me close up Kyler Murray, just talking about him. 64.4% passing, 37.22 in terms of yardage, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. For a rookie, okay, if he was third, fourth year in the league, I'd say, hey, man, you need more touchdowns than that in the NFL, especially in this offense that wants to pass the ball, right? But for a rookie, man, those are really nice stat lines, especially the completion percentage. And Kingsbury, he did keep the ball short. You look at Kenyan Drake when he came online. We're talking in terms of fantasy here. Kenyan Drake in 8 games there gets 643 yards. That's crazy. That's just in rushing the ball. He had 171 yards. Also had 8 touchdowns, so he's averaging a touchdown a game there. Once Drake got there midway through the season, and he was doing garbage with the Miami Dolphins, this team started to take off. The interesting thing, Brett, before we move it to the Rams, dude, Arizona getting DeAndre Hopkins for basically a bag of beans. Magic beans maybe, but beans. Now this receiving core, Kyler Murray, and they added some offensive line help in the draft, mind you, Arizona. Kyler Murray now has Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, the great Larry Fitzgerald, and DeAndre Hopkins to throw to with Kenyan Drake coming back.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Dude, they're going to be really fun to watch. Like you said, though, I still think they're Look, it wouldn't shock me if they put it together and they finish third in this division because they got a lot better. San Francisco, are they going to have a Super Bowl hangover? We can talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about Seattle too. LA to me is, and we'll transition now, Brad, to the LA Rams. LA is the dangerous one to me, meaning like
you think so?
I don't know what they're going to be. They get rid of Gurley.
It's hard to say, right?
Why don't you talk about Gurley and kind of your impressions of that? Because there's a whole lot to go into with the Rams.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about Gurley really got me upset. Starting a couple years ago. Yeah, and it really bothered me. I thought it was obnoxious, and he wouldn't play, or he was injured.
Yeah,
and
right.
The whole thing was discreet. I did not like that.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening? What's wrong with this guy? Like, is he injured or is he not? Because this is so annoying.
Yeah, I hear you. And so I always was under the impression that Gurley. Yeah, he was banged up. I feel like he had like an MCL. He had some knees, and you can hear in the press that he had a degenerative knee condition, all this stuff, right? And the mysteriousness, I don't think helped him because a lot of people were critical of him. You start to see reports that his career is going to be over, which I always thought were way below. Because when I watch the games, and part of what I do, I'll do a little mini plug here again for the Fantasy Football Almanac. Check out below the link below if you want to check that out. But again, sleepers, analysis, all that stuff. But when I watched the film of the preseason, I saw him running. I'm like, dude, like is he as good as he was his first year in the league, second year in the league? No, but he's still good enough, especially in the system, to be a good running back. And he put up double-digit touchdowns last year. He was fine. What concerned me is that McVay went and just started putting the offense on Goff's shoulders. And what I think people forget, because we're in such what happened last week kind of mode, especially because of the fantasy football and daily fantasy and all this stuff, like lineup distribution, all that. People think are like, oh, well, Gurley's done because he's not putting up, 4.5 yards a carry or whatever he was. But people forget that Todd Gurley sucked in Jeff Fisher's last year as a coach there. And they thought Todd Gurley might have been a bust then. Then McVay comes in, runs the offense through Gurley as they should, and breathes life into him. Then he's the greatest thing. And then he has a down year last year after kind of that mysterious knee injury, and then he sucks again. Now he's gone, and he's in Atlanta, and we'll see what happens there. But as I mentioned before with Dirk Cutter, I don't think he's going to have a great season. Again, not because he's not a good player, not because he can't produce, but because he's not in a good offense. So my thought on the Rams last year, though, Brad, specifically, is this is on McVay's shoulders because, Goff gets the big money. They start running the offense through him. They start running less. They don't get Gurley the volume that he really needs to be effective. Suddenly you see Malcolm Brown getting carries and goal line carries. 5 touchdowns for Malcolm Brown last year. It's annoying for fantasy owners. I think that Bill Belichick broke, and I've said this before last season, I think Bill Belichick in that Super Bowl broke Sean McVay. And
maybe.
I think that
it can happen.
Yeah, and like after putting up 3 points in that Super Bowl or whatever it was, basically kind of being shut down. I think
that was terrible.
It was a terrible Super Bowl to watch.
It was a terrible Super Bowl. That was one of the worst ever, right? It was awful.
It was bad.
I mean, the Patriots didn't do much better. Let's be honest.
No, they had one big play to Gronkowski.
To
That was it.
Gronk, they had one big play to Gronkowski, and that got them their only touchdown, I believe, if I remember it correctly.
Yeah, I believe the final was
Yeah,
13
that
to
whole thing
3,
was
if memory
terrible.
serves. Yeah, it's no good. No bueno.
13-3, yeah. So, there's another weird thing because it's always odd when a quarterback who, comes out and overproduces, right, and
Mm.
shines. When that quarterback gets a big paycheck, it's like the next season, it's not the same. And that happens over and over again. And I wonder if it's because there's a certain amount of pressure that comes along with that money.
I
You're the guy. You're the one. You're making more than anyone on the team, so you better be better than everyone on that team. You
I
know what
think
I'm
there's
saying?
I think there's a sense of that with Goff, and I think he's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I think to me he's kind of similar to Matt Ryan, who also went to a Super Bowl and also lost to the Patriots, as we saw. Like that to me is kind of where he's at. I don't think Goff is ever going to be, like a Patrick Mahomes, where you think you can just, hey, let's give this guy $40 million a year in Patrick Mahomes. Let's give him $40 million a year. Yeah, we might have a worse offensive line. We might have a worse running back. We might have a worse defense, but he's going to be able to, put our team on his back and he'll score. Russell Wilson, we saw that. Russell Wilson gets his big money. The offensive line takes a slip. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks take a little bit of a step back, but now we see they're kind of going forward again. Even with Russell Wilson his big payday. Goff, the thing to me was part of that, and Goff, in the pocket, you can see him kind of get a little bit of happy feet like Peyton Manning did. And again, this isn't a criticism. This is just,
Yeah.
I think, a valid, you watch the tape, you see it. He's still very effective. He can still do well, but I think that pressure plus Sean McVay kind of transitioning this from Gurley taking a load to Goff taking a load, I think that was too quick of a transition. Like, I know that McVay thinks a lot of Jared Goff, but I'll be honest with you, and you've been very critical of Kirk Cousins in the past. I think last year you put Kirk Cousins on the Rams. I think they were a better team last year, truly. Because Kirk Cousins can deal with, I think, the outside pressure a little bit more. Maybe he's not and I don't think physically talented. I don't
Well,
think long term Cousins is better. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like Goff with the pressure and McVay with the transition, it just didn't jive. And until it took McVay a little bit longer to figure out, hey, let's start running this through the running backs again. Even if we're under 4 yards of carry, let's focus on the run. And the Rams went on a little bit of a run towards the end of the season, but it was too little too late at that point. They just couldn't get over
well,
the
for
hump,
the for the record, we are now putting Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff into the same conversation, right? Meaning that we
Yep.
feel that they are kind of the same guy. Is that fair?
It's fair for me. How do
I
you
mean,
feel
I
about
think
that?
that. Yeah, I think it's very fair. And I don't disagree with you. I don't exactly agree with you, but it would be like they are. I think it's apples to apples, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't say something so asinine as to say, like, putting Drew Brees on the Rams makes them better because obviously it does,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why we didn't use a name like that,
Hmm.
you know?
Yep.
Cousins, he's an enigma, though, to the end of time. And I think,
Hey man, you have
not to
you
trail
have
off
to
into
admit
that.
Cousins exceeded your expectations last year. That win
Well,
against New
I don't
Orleans,
know. I'm not going to admit that. He beat New
you are
Orleans. Okay,
so
was that?
dude, you are so stubborn with this. He had made big throws in plenty of primetime games last year and
He
won a
played
playoff
well.
game.
He played great. He
Come on,
played
man.
great.
He
He didn't
exceeded
look
your
so good against
expectations.
Green Bay. No, no, not
Yeah.
exceed. He's
Yeah, you're right.
fine. He's fine.
He's
He's
fine.
fine, but he's not. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
won a playoff game. All right. Well, it only took you about 12 years, you turd.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people that haven't won playoff games.
Anyways,
But no, I get you.
well, that's a
Like,
good point.
I'm not saying. Look, I'm saying Kirk Cousins, his ceiling's probably second tier quarterback. I'm not saying that he's as good as Mahomes or I think Lamar Jackson. Although as a passer, I don't put Lamar Jackson in a top tier as a passer. But as a quarterback, with what he can do running the ball, he's a game changer. I don't put him. Russell Wilson's in that category.
Not that.
I think Tom Brady at this
Yeah,
point in
yeah,
Tampa, we'll
that
see
was
what
a.
happens. He could be back in that category. Ben Roethlisberger coming off
Oh
injury, he
man.
could be on that. Like there are certain quarterbacks where you're just like, dude, this guy has balls and he can ball out, and you can,
Yeah.
if everything's going bad, he's such a good quarterback that he can still win games. And I think those guys are kind of in that category. Like Kirk Cousins, I feel like he needs the defense. He needs Dalvin Cook. Jared Goff, I think he needs a valid running game. However, the Rams, after getting cutting bait and getting rid of Todd Gurley, they added Cam Akers in the draft, and I think Akers could be everything that Todd Gurley was a couple years ago. So I'm actually very high on. We'll get into the fantasy content later. later in the show and all that. Not this episode, but I'm talking about like later episodes. But I like Cam Akers a lot. And the Rams, I think, are going to be better, but they also got rid of both offensive coordinators, or both coordinators. So Wade Phillips is gone, which I thought was a very questionable move. But again, we'll talk about in the team preview, but they're going to be weird. Let's move it, Brad. Let's move it.
Can I just say this real quick before we move on?
Yeah.
Is that something magical happens when Minnesota and New Orleans get together for playoff games. Jesus, right?
Yeah,
they're just fascinating and drama-filled and incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I am looking forward to more of those.
And, after we did these season reviews, there was so much movement. Like, I don't even know that we talked about Brady in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers segment. Certainly not the New England segment that we talked about Brady and his exit. So I can't wait to start getting into what's going to happen, especially with the schedule being released now. Let's see. Next one, we're going to talk about the 49ers, man. Yeah, you were high on them all year. Like I said earlier in the show, it took me about two NFL weeks. Like I saw him. I do watch every game. I saw him the first game, but every time you see like the first game, you're like, okay, well, that was impressive, but like, is that really kind of trying to see him 2 weeks in a row dominating on the defensive line? And I'm big on defensive line, and if a team can generate pressure consistently with 4 rushers, it allows you to drop 7 into coverage, and it's just a nightmare for teams. You can do anything like that.
You can do anything. Yeah, it's such a gift. It's a huge gift.
Yeah, and so like if I'm building a team, if I'm a general manager building a team, obviously you want the quarterback. You need to invest in offensive linemen, not invest money, but invest like picks and all that stuff, and generate an offensive line group that plays well as a group. I'm not saying you have to sign your left tackle to $80 million or anything like that, but I'm saying you need a team, an offensive line that communicates well, a good, smart center, like Jeff Saturday used to be for the Indianapolis Colts back in the day. Like, he wasn't a heralded prospect, but he was a smart guy that could communicate well. And because that's like a dance. It's like a choreographed dance at offensive line. So you need those. You need some, of course, some skill players. But defensively, you need pass rushers. Because if you're a good offense, then you need somebody that can rush the quarterback. Even if you have bad defensive backs, a good pass rush will fix everything, right? You could have the best cornerbacks in the team, but if you can't get to the passer, a receiver's always going to be able to find an opening, even against the best pass defenses. So if you have that defensive line, if you can generate a pass rush and get a couple fat guys in the middle clogging the run, even if you have a mediocre defensive backfield, even if you have mediocre linebackers, it cures everything. In San Francisco, man, their defensive line is young, and they are the fastest group I've seen. Like, I saw some games a couple years ago when Philadelphia made their Super Bowl run where their defensive line, I'm like, my gosh, they look like a swarm of angry bees. They're playing fast, but they didn't do it all season long. And the only thing that could get in San Francisco's way was Patrick Mahomes, a guy who has mobility and ability to hit guys downfield. I don't know that outside of like Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson, I don't know that there's another quarterback that can consistently beat this San Francisco team.
Well, I tell you who cannot do it is Aaron Rodgers. Man, you know, not to bring up the Packers all the time, but as good as Aaron is against Dallas, he's just as bad against San Francisco, man. And they beat the crap out of him twice last year, and he's no slouch, right?
He's no slouch. Now, Green Bay.
He's no slouch.
Speaking about Green Bay, if they could have just given Aaron Rodgers another weapon outside of Devontae Adams in the passing game, those would have been closer games. I still think San Francisco just overmatched them. I mean,
sure. They're a better product for sure.
As Shanahan, I love his coaching. John Lynch, what he's done with this organization, accumulating draft picks and landing the prospects that he's landed.
Huge. He's been amazing.
He's been incredible as a general manager.
He's been incredible, for sure. Do they give out any awards for these guys?
Yeah, they do.
Do they recognize
but I don't know if he got it. He certainly should have. I don't know if he got it or not.
Yeah,
I don't follow that too much. But how many teams, so growing up as a Redskins fan, they didn't have a pass rush for seriously 20 years. There was one year where they got Bruce Smith in free agency, and Bruce Smith got 10 sacks. There was another year where they had Greg Williams, and Ryan Kerrigan was doing well in sacks, and they had Brian Rakpo back then, and Greg Williams was just blitzing with reckless abandon so that they could generate pass rush. But the Redskins and countless teams across the NFL, they can't find a defensive line that can generate a pass rush with 4 people. And you look in the playoffs, if you can get to the quarterback with 4, the New York Giants, when they beat the New England Patriots in the 2 Super Bowls, including that one loss season for the Patriots, they generated pass rush with 4. And when you can do that, especially in December and January, it screws everything up. And so, San Francisco, are they going to have a Super Bowl hangover? Maybe. I think they're too good of an organization to not make the playoffs this year. I think maybe it's a reload year. But, dude, on top of that, Brad, they had 2 first-round picks, added more depth to defensive line, and got a receiver to go with Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, right?
Dude, they're on an upward path. I say this. I say San Francisco, I think, was the better team going into that Super Bowl, and I still believe that.
Do you?
I do think that they are the better team. I think that their construct and their roster.
I think they were the better team, right?
Right.
But I think that Kansas City, their offense is so great that it overcame the fact that San Francisco is the better team. Because who knows what Garoppolo is going to be? I think he can be something incredible. Mm-hmm. Only time will tell, but he wasn't there yet. Mahomes definitely had him beat, for sure.
Exactly. But to be fair, Garoppolo had Mahomes beat the first, 3.5 quarters, right? And that is true. That's where I was getting to is San Francisco, they're constructed their roster, their salary cap situation, the youth that they have, the coaching. If I'm telling you, they're in a 7 to 10 year championship window with what that organization brings. This could be the next New England Patriots kind of run that we're going to see for maybe a decade. I really believe that with just everything they have. It's not like they're acquiring pieces and they're renting players in free agency for 1 to 2 years. They're consistently getting draft picks and consistently hitting on those draft picks, and they're well coached. But what I was going to say, Brad, I think to the point you just made is, Kansas City Chiefs had Patrick Mahomes, and that offense is just so fast that Mahomes can do his thing. Right. He can wiggle out of the pass rush, as we saw late in the Super Bowl. And Tyreek Hill, I'm sorry, as good as your cornerbacks are, Tyreek Hill is so freaking fast that he could run 15-yard out routes and be wide open all game, as he was in the Super Bowl. Then they added a running back who's basically the second coming of Brian Westbrook in Philadelphia from all those years ago. So they've added to this offense, Brad. To me, they're still those two teams are still the class of the NFL. No disrespect to Baltimore, who I also love organizationally.
I agree.
My thing is, I think Kansas City gets back to the Super Bowl unless Mahomes gets injured, just because they're that damn good and they broke through mentally last year. I think Tampa is going to be super interesting, but I think San Francisco, along with New Orleans, as I said last year, San Francisco, New Orleans, to me, are the class of the NFL. And
I would agree.
It's just the mental game for San Francisco. They'll be back if they can overcome the mental game, and that's my only hesitation. Last team here, Brad, let's move it to Seattle. What do you think about Russell Wilson, what they did last year, my man?
Russell Wilson is it seems like he's getting better and better. And I think that, I do caution Russell Wilson a little bit, because it looks to me a little bit like it's turning into a kind of Aaron Rodgers situation where Russell Wilson is so damn good and they're not giving him what he needs, but he's so good that he can take them to the playoffs, right? I mean, the 49ers were a way better team than Seattle, okay?
Yeah.
But because Russell Wilson is so damn special, he can get them there. But I've seen this before. It's a bit of a kind of a trap to think that one guy can be so good and such a superhero that he doesn't need help. And maybe I think that's what's developing.
So that's a great comment. So and you and me, because we generally get Seattle fans that'll watch this on YouTube and stuff and comment, because they always think that we're kind of not giving them enough respect. You and me respect Russell Wilson to no end. We don't like him.
Right.
You're a Packers fan.
Right.
He's basically kicked you in the nuts year after year, in recent history.
For sure.
And me growing up a Redskins fan, actually Seattle has constully kicked the Redskins in the nuts. So we actually have that in common, Brad. But Russell Wilson's so good, man. He's just so good. Let's remember last year, who was their tight end there? I can't remember. It was their fifth string tight end by the time you get there. I like the guy in fantasy. I'll pull up his name because I have it here. Where's the dude here? Jacob Hollister was an inch away. Yep. Late in the season, an inch away from breaking the goal line.
Right.
And if he had done that, Seattle is the number 1 seed. San Francisco is the number 5 seed. What happens in the playoffs then? We don't know, right? To your point of how close they are with that Russell Wilson.
That's incorrect. If they would have got over that, Green Bay would have been the 1 seed.
Oh, okay.
And Seattle would have been the 2.
Okay, my bad. But they would have got the bye.
But yes.
Yeah.
yes, they would have gotten the bye
And
for
then,
sure, which is huge. It's everything.
It is. It is. And then what else? So, and then to your analogy, right? How good is Aaron Rodgers? Well, Aaron Rodgers was one poorly executed onside kick recovery away from taking kind of a lackluster Green Bay team to the Super Bowl that year. You know, when San Francisco or when Seattle got in. So, you know, I know what you're saying, and I agree with that. And that's part of what we were talking about earlier with Goff is when the quarterbacks get the big money, it takes a while for these teams to kind of reload. And in Seattle, when they're transitioning from the Legion of Boom into what we're getting now, what they've done for Russell Wilson is they've quietly gathered a receiving core that's pretty talented. Like, I like Lockett. Is he a Pro Bowl player? I mean, he is, but is he like that guy who's an all-pro receiver? No. DK Metcalf, last year's rookie, who actually exceeded expectations. They got him ridiculously low in the draft, like third or fourth round or something. What did he do? He came on strong at the end of the season, puts up 900 yards, close to 60 catches, 7 touchdowns. He's going to be even better. They get Greg Olsen after being waived from Carolina to add him at tight end. Who's going to be a nightmare in the red zone. Yes, you know, in between the 20s certainly, but in the red zone, Greg Olsen, Russell Wilson likes to hit his tight end there. That's an upgrade there in my view. Will Dissly's, you know, the perennially injured Will Dissly is going to be back. So they do have weapons offensively. I think the big question though is what do they do defensively? Are they going to, because the Legion of Boom days, that dominating defense, I don't think we're going to see that from Seattle again. Now that they've invested so much money in the offense. So now it becomes, okay, what can Russell Wilson do? Can you get him enough weapons, maybe not expensive weapons, but enough to do well? And I think they've done that. Chris Carson, can he hold on to the ball? Because he fumbles all the time. If he can hold on to the ball, he's a very effective running back. I think, Rashad Penny, who got injured, can he be that out of the backfield guy? I know they might have added some competition for him. CJ Prosise, I know, is gone, but I think they added a guy in the draft. Forgive me, I can't remember. So they have these pieces offensively, but the defensive component, we were talking about this with San Francisco, that Legion of Boom team, they had a nasty defensive line too, and it's hard to replicate that. So Carroll, as good as of a coach as he is, he's coaching these players and getting a lot out of them, but they're just not as talented defensively as they used to be. So what we saw there, in my opinion, like in their Super Bowl victory year and then their Super Bowl loss year, Russell Wilson was starting to ascend, and the defense was starting to descend, and we're starting to see that kind of that transition now. And I think the defense is coming back up and better than people give it credit for. But are they good enough to beat San Francisco this year? I don't think that their roster is good enough to, but I think they're stronger mentally this year.
Yeah, and I think that Russell Wilson, this might be his best year. Like, this is the one.
I do. I agree.
I'm feeling. You know, like that, the peak of peak, like here it is. Like whether it's this year or this year and next year, here's where we're going to be.
I think we're going to get.
It's funny because
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because I hate Seattle, but I like Russell Wilson, and it's a weird thing. I can't stand Seattle as a unit, but I almost find myself coming around to hope he succeeds. But he's had a lot of early success, right?
Yeah, I mean he's a phenomenal quarterback. I would say he used to be underrated. I think now at least mainstream is starting to catch up with it. I still don't think he gets his due, but I mean this dude's on a Hall of Fame trajectory to me. No question about it. And I do agree with you. I think we're going to probably get the next 3. I think these next 3 years are going to be his best years statistically when we look back, because the team has my favorite offense built around him. I think they've done a really nice job of adding these receivers that are kind of young and that are diversified. Like Lockett can get behind defenses. Metcalf is a physical guy who can also get behind defenses. Now you got Greg Olsen and Will Dissly kind of working in the middle of the field. You got the power run game. I think we're going to see 3 very, very good years for Russell, and we'll see what happens, man. Anything can happen. Anything could happen in the playoffs. And this team, you know.
That's right. That's what's so beautiful about the NFL. Yeah. Anything could happen.
Anything could happen. I mean, like, there was a time last year where we were talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they were 6-4. We're like, dude, they better start winning. And then they never lost a game after that. So it's, man, the NFL, it's a beautiful thing. You tend to get teams that peak in the first 4 weeks, the second 4 weeks. So, like, even the teams that are good start peaking at different times. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad the schedule's out, man. We're going to get some ball this year. I can't wait. I can't wait. Dude, I think we can nip that in the bud there. We're going to have, definitely start getting into the 2020 stuff. Now that the schedule's out, we're going to be talking once again, everybody watching and listening. Click on the link below, Fantasy Football Almanac. Check it out. You'll see why it's such a good fantasy football book, Fantasy Football Magazine. You'll see why we've been a top seller for the last few years. In our history, man, we'll let that speak for itself. I mean, we predict sleepers better than anybody else, and we tell you what players to avoid in the first few rounds of the draft so that you don't get kicked in the balls, with poor play early in the season. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll catch you on another episode soon.